All right, so I am finally going to do my video on ADHD. And the fun thing about this video is I think you're probably going to see a lot of how ADHD works as I'm doing this, because this is like my second take, and I realized I have so much information and so much stuff in my head. It's super hard to like focus this and put it in any kind of order. I feel like there's just a flood of thoughts. So you're probably going to see some, what I feel like is an ADHD brain trying to work through explaining what ADHD is, which is hilarious. But I'll try my best not to make it super long. I don't want it to be super long, but okay, let's just get started. So the reason I wanted to do this video is because I think ADHD plays an important role in a lot of people's transidentification. It played a big role in mine. Some core issues that I struggle with and that people with ADHD generally do struggle with is impulse control. And impulse control is a huge issue and one that definitely plays into transidentification. The other issue that is a huge one that plays into my transidentification, at least, was hyperfixation and rumination. From the minute I heard about being trans, or what being trans was, the first time I heard about trans men or had my friends start to identify as trans men, it stuck in my head. And I couldn't reason my way out of that thought process. I would think about it constantly, ruminate on it constantly. And the constant rumination made me think that I was reasoning through it. But I wasn't reasoning through it because I was taking in no other information. I wasn't expanding my thought. I was just thinking about the same thing over and over and over again. So while I thought I was reasoning through it, I wasn't. I was ruminating. And I really could have used an outside person to talk me through some other aspects of my thought process, or some other things to think about and bring in to the thought process. You know, like a big one would be, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a girl? What are my thoughts about that? And what are some other thoughts maybe I haven't had? That's just an example. So the rumination is a huge aspect. The most important thing that I think is overlooked with people with ADHD is that ADHD primarily is an issue with executive functions. We have difficulty in those areas. So executive functions are going to include high order cognitive abilities, such as working memory, inhibitory control, cognitive flexibility, planning, reasoning, and problem solving. That's the core issue with ADHD. It's also it's definitely an issue in autism as well. So take those issues and just apply them to everything. Everything. Apply them to school. Apply them to relationships. Everything. And that's a huge thing that's so frustrating for me when trying to work through explaining ADHD, or work through just what it is. I mean, I had to do a lot of my own research just to fucking fully understand it, because most teachers, most therapists, most psychologists, most psychiatrists, most doctors don't understand the full scope of ADHD. People pretty much hear ADHD and they think, oh, you can't sit still in class. You can't pay attention. Yeah, that's a small part of it, in my opinion. The smallest part. The biggest issue for me, honestly, has been relationships. Has been social relationships and the inhibitory control issues, the cognitive flexibility issues. I am very prone to black and white thinking. Super hard for me to have middle ground. Super hard for me to have gray. I can logically understand that there's middle ground, but the emotion aspect of that is like, I don't like that there has to be middle ground. So For me, the main points that this affects and that I want to make clear is that people with ADHD who struggle with these issues often have a lot of loneliness. We don't tend to make good friendships. We don't tend to have friendships. We don't tend to have even sometimes family relationships are strained. It's a pretty well established fact that kids who have cognitive disabilities or cognitive issues like ADHD and autism or tend to be difficult kids to raise and tend to be abused more by their parents. It sucks, but that does happen. So we oftentimes have strained relationships because I was watching this one guy who I think he's a psychologist. I'm not 100% sure. I'll link his presentations in this video, but he talks about how the reason this affects friendships and relationships so much is because people can excuse forgetfulness, which forgetfulness is a huge component of ADHD too. We are forgetful as all hell. People can forgive forgetfulness. They can even forgive flakiness a little bit. People, on the other hand, do not tend to forgive meanness. And oftentimes the impulse control issue we can be mean when we don't 100% mean to be mean, like we're not trying to be mean, but it comes off as mean. So a good example of that is, most people, you'll learn not to say the first thing that comes that falls out of your brain, right? Don't let it come out your mouth. Like, think before you talk kind of thing. People with ADHD tend to just blurt the shit out that falls into our goddamn brain. And usually the first thing that falls into your brain is not always the most proper thing to say to somebody. Being brutally honest oftentimes is not the best thing for relationships. Tactfulness is important. Tactfulness is something I feel like I've really struggled to learn, and I'm still not 100% great on it, but I've had to actually learn it, like logically learn tactfulness. So that's difficult, and I think that has to do with the impulse control, right? It comes out of our mouths, and then the person goes, "Wow, that was really fucking rude," and you're like, "Well, no, that's just the truth. That's being honest, right? We're all supposed to be honest and truthful." Not really, though, right? You're supposed to be truthful to a point, the white lies and whatnot. White lies, yeah, we don't get that necessarily. So that's why relationships are affected. We also have difficulty in work and education, which, if you have difficulty in education and work, that's just going to kind of clutter and mess up your life a lot. It's difficult for us to hold down jobs. I think the impulse control is a big issue with holding down jobs. Also, just getting bored. We just, like, I get bored so super quick with just life. I feel like I always have to have like something going on, something interesting going on. I'm better than I used to be, and getting my other mental health things under control has helped the ADHD component, or, because everything feeds in. It's ADHD doesn't stand alone. It is a component of the brain, the whole mind working, and everything comes into play. But I do notice that when I am stressed, when I am under more mental, when I'm having like mental health issues, the ADHD stuff just really becomes harder to manage. Everything just becomes harder to manage. So the work aspect, get bored super quick, and then don't want to do it, and I don't know how to explain it, like, because I can already hear someone saying, "Well, everybody gets bored. That's normal." Yeah, I know, but like, how do I explain that? It's basically like every normal human emotion and experience maybe like wound up to 100 instead of being at 50. Like, I don't know. It's just, it seems like it's more intense, or maybe it's just harder for us to control it. So the difficulty with work. Also, the other reason that education and work is difficult is because another issue with ADHD is organization and working memory. So working memory means your ability to retain some information for a short term and recall it. Like, recalling stuff is really difficult for me too. I know probably in my videos you've seen me maybe sometimes struggling with a word I know. That's an aspect of ADHD people don't know about, and it was something I learned about a couple years ago, and I was like, oh my god, that explains why sometimes I just can't recall the goddamn thing I want to say. It's there, but I can't recall it, and it makes you feel like an idiot. And the sad thing is people do look at you like you're stupid when you can't recall things, or when you forget words, or when you don't have good short-term memory. It just, people pass that judgment on you. So our lives tend to be impulsive, fixations and ruminations, and our lives are generally disorganized. From what I have observed in myself and some of my friends who have ADHD, is we tend to live for that next dopamine hit, right? We're jumping from one thing to another. What's the new thing? What's the exciting thing? And I mean exciting thing to us, which can be all kinds of weird things. Like, I can go down a rabbit hole on, learning about birds. I fixate on that. It for some reason, it ticks that box for me that particular day. And I'm like, off to the races, and it's all birds all the time for 2 weeks. And my poor wife has to listen to me tell her all about the birds, which also doesn't do well for relationships and friendships when you're talking constantly about your interests and not having an equal conversation, which is another thing I've really struggled with in my life. And I have to say, the ADHD diagnosis has been very helpful for my marriage. I feel like after getting the diagnosis and having the psychologist sit down with me and my wife and explain some aspects of it, I feel like my wife really forgave me for a lot of stuff that she thought I was doing on purpose, or that she thought I didn't care about her, or I wasn't listening. And this simply wasn't true. I just don't remember things. I don't know why. I have a friend I've had a conversation with about her. She takes care of her grandmother, and she's told me multiple times, like, the grandmother is her mother's mother. I'm pretty sure. She's told me this multiple times, and I still have difficulty remember who the grandmother is, like whose mother the grandmother is. It's just, but it's one of those things where, like, most people will probably remember that information. I won't remember that information, and it seems rude, and it seems like I don't care, and I'm not listening to the person. But that's simply not the case. I'm not intentionally trying to be rude. So it messes with our relationships. And yeah, from a young age, if you struggle in school and you struggle with attention, you struggle with working memory and impulse control, all these things set you up really young for people. Like, people pick on you, other kids pick on you, even teachers. I have had teachers pick on me. I've had teachers be mad at me about stuff, and I feel like I learned really early, really young. I felt like I was stupid really, really young. And I still struggle that. I struggle so much with feeling inadequate, dumb, stupid, and not able to do things. I still feel like I'm not an adult, because adults are able to do certain things that I just really struggle with still doing. And that's a hard one to overcome. And it is a lifelong battle, especially if you have not had very kind people in your life who've been understanding about some differences. Just kind of looking through my notes real quick, just so I just kind of make sure I hit everything. All right, I talked a little bit about hyperfixation, fixation and rumination. That's a big component. If we get something stuck in our head and it makes sense to us, we will think about that thing. That thing is going to be the center of our world. And we probably can't move forward from that thing or past that thing until we fixate on something else, or we've run that thing into the ground and realize it doesn't work. For me, that was transition, right? I got it in my head that because I was gender nonconforming, because I acted like a boy and liked male boy things or man things or whatever, that I had the mind of a man in the physical body of a woman. It got stuck in my head when I was 21 years old, and I couldn't shake it. It was a rumination. It was a thing that stuck there for years and years and years, and I thought about it so much over the years. There was times that I would purposefully avoid anything trans or avoid thinking about it because I knew I would spiral. I would ruminate, spiral downright. Just my life would be consumed with the idea of transition. And transition, I believed it answered all of my struggles and all of my questions and all of my, problems was down to that. And I really thought that I had really thought about it and understood everything because I thought about it so much, right? I'm thinking about it a lot, so that must mean I'm reasoning through it, but it's not. Rumination, it gives you the illusion that you're really thinking logically through a process when you're not. You're just thinking about the same process over and over again. And I feel like I really needed somebody to understand that aspect, step in and offer me different perspectives, get me to disengage my brain on a particular thing and kind of look at something else. I can't disengage it myself sometimes. You need help doing that. There are times I will actually be brutally honest with my wife and going, I am having a moment where I cannot disengage. Help me disengage a little bit. What do you think? Help me figure this out. So that's definitely a component. And that can be a big component with transition, right? We get it stuck in our head and we can't disengage. We need somebody to help us. If a therapist understands the full scope of what ADHD is, they could probably see some of those aspects going on in somebody, right? Maybe that person could do with a diagnosis. Maybe that person could do with some extra help. If they had help deciphering complications in their brain, how might that better help them to just make better life decisions, right? I can't make a good, reasonable decision if I am just ruminating. No, I'm not making a good decision there. I'm ruminating. So also, ADHD to me makes everything feel really disorganized and fast moving. So everything just feels crazy to me a lot of times. My life has felt very chaotic. My brain feels chaotic. I feel like there are 100 computer tabs open at one time. I feel like there are, multiple trains of thought happening all at one time, and I can jump on one track, right? And I can ride that rail for a while. I can ride that track for a while. I'm also aware of all the other tracks going on. I still know what's going on, but I'm gonna ride this one for a while. And then I might jump off and go on another one. But that gets difficult. Feeling overwhelmed by your own brain is really difficult. So ADHD is one of those things where, just like autism, you have to understand the whole person. You have to understand all the person's difficulties when going into believing that they are making an educated decision. And if you're going to use the argument that transition or being trans is something that somebody has to understand about themselves, or transition is something someone has to give consent for or understand the implications of or make a logical decision on, you also have to take into consideration that other person's mental faculties and mental abilities or lack of. That's not to say that people with autism or ADHD can't make decisions. We obviously can. But it's unfair, and it's really just ignorant to think that some of the things we struggle with can't be things that we struggle with. Like, you know, if I get stuck in a rumination loop, it's sad to say, but I need some help getting out of there. I can't really reason out of it myself. I usually will just, you know, I'll have to hit my head against the wall a few times and maybe then I'll let it go. And that's kind of what transition was for me, right? I ruminated on it for years. Finally, there was kind of a peak moment, tipped me over into going like, I'm doing it, you know? I ruminated on it for 10 plus years. And then I decided to transition, and then I transitioned and I did the thing. And then I realized, oh, this didn't solve what I thought it was going to solve. This added a whole, I switched, I traded a handful of problems for a different handful of problems. I still have a handful of problems. I didn't get rid of the problems. The problems are still there. So yeah, I mean, I hope this video explained a decent amount about ADHD and how it really is an issue with that higher level thinking. And I think that's super important with making life-altering, life-changing decisions, don't you? High-order cognitive abilities is pretty important with decision-making. And when someone struggles with that, that should probably be taken into consideration. The utter failures of the mental health community is astonishing with all of this stuff. Just unbelievable. It's really sad, actually, because now I have lasting physical scars and effects and issues and things I can never change back because I didn't get adequate mental health. I didn't get adequate diagnosis. I didn't get adequate just understanding overall from therapists, from the mental health community. Yeah, it's a huge failure. Anyways, I hope this was helpful. I hope this helped people understand what ADHD is, what it isn't. There's tons of information out there. I will put some of the links in the video that I found good information on. There is probably a ton of stuff I didn't even cover. Maybe there's some stuff I got wrong, but this is how I understand it. This is how I have, this is some of the research I've learned about. And thank you for watching.